Government Roundtable with the government of Greece. I am Daniel Franklin, Executive and Diplomatic Editor of The Economist, and I'll be moderating the event with my colleague Joan Hoey from the Economist Intelligence Unit. As you can see, those of you who are familiar with our events, oh dear, yes, this is a much reduced event compared with the normal roundtable where we have hundreds of people in the room, but it is not reduced in terms of the speakers and the quality of the program, and that is crucially important. We have a fantastic, stellar program over the next 2 days, so I think that's a wonderful thing. We have, of course, much to discuss. We have the theme of cohesion in turbulent times, and there's plenty of turbulence around, whether it's in the Eastern Med, in the economy, whether it's the big developments in the Western Balkans, whether it's to do with migration, whether it's to do with the opportunities in sectors like energy and investment. And all those things we will discuss with a really top-notch selection of speakers over the next 2 days. I would like to say a special thank you this year to all our sponsors. We thank them every year, but it's, I think, especially important in these difficult times that we have supporters who've stuck with us and who make sure that this event can truly remain an annual event despite the circumstances. Thank you very much, and thank you to all our speakers who have joined us and traveled, again, often in difficult circumstances, to be with us today. We will be, just a couple of housekeeping announcements, we'll be taking plenty of breaks so that we can do cleansing in between sessions, and we will try, we haven't yet set a very good example because we are starting a little bit late, but we will try as far as possible to stick to schedule, not least because we have plenty of speakers who are joining us virtually, and we have to be very tight on timing to enable that to happen properly. So without further ado, we're going to start, before we have our opening keynotes from President Hollande and Sigmar Gabriel, we're going to start with a brief scene setting between myself and Joan, and to get a sense of the Economist Intelligence Unit's forecast for the world and for Europe and for Greece. So Joan, let's start with the world. Just let's throw a few figures out there to concentrate the mind. What's the EIU's forecast for global growth this year and next?
The global outlook is bleak, as I think everybody in this room appreciates very much, and the Economist Intelligence Unit forecast for global output in 2020 is that it will be a contraction of 5.2% this year. All regions of the world will experience a recession, and China will be one of the few countries that register growth. Our forecast is for growth of 1.7% in China. And we don't expect global GDP to recover to pre-pandemic levels before at least 2022. And obviously within that, there's a lot of regional divergence. So Asian countries will be the first to recover, some as early as 2021.
Well, that's pretty mind-concentrating. If you take Europe in that overall picture, how does Europe do?
Well, according to our forecast, the Eurozone will be the worst affected region of the world, and we're forecasting a contraction of 8.6%. So that compares with a contraction in Asia of 2.4%, in North America, a contraction of about 5.4%. Latin America is also going to be very hard hit with the contraction we project of 8.2%. And I think within Europe, the shock obviously has been asymmetric, and the recovery also will be asymmetric. So we have contractions ranging, according to our forecast, from about minus 5.9% in Germany to contractions in double digits in Southern Europe, in Italy and Spain, in France of about 10%, in the UK of 9.5%. And those forecasts assume that there will be no repeat of the national lockdowns that we saw early in the crisis, but we will have local lockdowns, we will have social distancing obviously remaining in place.
So it's not a worst case scenario, in other words, what you're saying, because it could be worse if COVID got significantly worse.
Yes,
yeah.
And maybe we can talk about that, the risk of that as well. So if we're looking at the recovery in general, we're looking at a global recovery by 2022, but probably an Asia recovery by 2021. Europe's going to be a bit slower, but obviously with variation. So overall, probably a full recovery by 2023. So we do expect...
When you say recovery, do you mean recovery back to previous levels of output or
yeah,
just
recovery,
growth?
yes, recovery in terms of real GDP levels to 2019 levels,
yeah.
Pre-pandemic levels.
Okay, so you talked about Southern Europe being minus double digits. What about Greece within that picture?
Yes, so actually Greece probably is not going to be as bad as some of the other Southern European countries according to our forecast. So the Greek economy contracted in the second quarter by about 14% quarter on quarter, by about 15.2% year on year, which was a sharper contraction than some expected. We do expect a bounce back in Q3, as we do everywhere, but that's a kind of base effect more than a huge recovery or return to normal economic activity. But we've revised down our forecast for Greece to minus 8.5% from minus 7.5% based on those second quarter figures. And that's basically going to wipe out all the gains since 2017. Now, we do think that the Recovery Fund is going to make and the EU budget, the 7-year multi-annual financial framework, is going to make a big difference to Greece and can add several percentage points per year to growth. But still, the recovery here, this is a big setback, and the recovery is going to be slower than in other places.
Let's just to conclude, as we said, it's not the worst case scenario. What are the downside risks to this? What could make things even worse?
I think there's several. I think the obvious one is that that there's a risk that the recovery could be derailed by a resurgence of the virus in winter, resulting in the reimposition of national lockdowns. That's not our baseline, but that's the risk. And that could lead to a double-dip recession in many countries. And even without that happening, we think there are countries which are at risk already of a double-dip recession, one of them being India, and probably closer to home here, some countries with very difficult economic situations, such as Turkey, I think, is at risk as well of a double-dip recession. So that's one. I think political instability risk, and the risk of serious social unrest in parts of the world, I think that is high. Obviously, unemployment is a lagging indicator. It's going to peak in 2021, even 2022 maybe. And in poorer countries with little fiscal space and social safety nets and so on, I think we could see the eruption of political instability, protests, and so on. And that was already happening, actually, in 2018, 2019 in many emerging markets. And I think a third risk is that geopolitical tensions, exacerbated by the crisis, could result in actual conflict in various global flashpoints. For example, what we've seen already, what's been happening between China and India on the border, in the South China Sea, and even here in the Eastern Med. We've had a taste of what could happen in recent weeks. So I think those are a few of the downside risks.
Look, all this is terribly sobering way to start the day. So let's have some more cheerful thoughts, if we could, just as before we go into our keynote sessions. There must be some brighter. Could you alight on perhaps 3 brighter spots that could make for a better outlook, or things that we could be a little bit more optimistic about?
I don't know if I can do cheerful, Daniel, but I think upside risks, we can, talk about some potential upside risks, and one is the obverse of the first downside risk, I guess, which is the possibility that we could get an effective vaccine sooner than we forecast. Our long-standing forecast has been that we'll be doing very well if we get a vaccine rolled out by the end of 2021. But if we get an effective vaccine sooner, then the global economy could bounce back much more quickly than we're currently forecasting. I think a second possibility, obviously crises do present opportunities as well as risks, and this could encourage radical policy shifts that would address some of the long-standing productivity and growth deficits in Europe, stimulate investment in new productive industries and technologies and innovation, and shake out, have maybe some creative destruction which political leaders have shied away from for many years. And I think finally, the crisis has exposed vulnerabilities in global supply chains, and this could open up opportunities for some countries, such as Greece, countries in this neighborhood as well, in the Balkans, in Eastern Europe, opportunities for nearshoring of production and so on. But obviously, opportunities in a crisis do require very bold leadership. They require somebody to actually seize those opportunities. So hopefully we can discuss some of those things.
Thank you,
today.
Joan. I think that's really interesting. Lots of thoughts to carry us forward. And you end on leadership. We're going to now pass to leadership. So let's thank you very much, Joan, and let's invite President Hollande and Sigmar Gabriel, please, to join me here on the stage.